The distress beacon had been transmitting for 3 cycles when the Valerian Empire's scout ship Celestial Mercy finally detected it. Commander Zethria stood on the bridge, her crystalline skin refracting the blue light of the navigation console as she studied the readings with growing concern. The signal originated from a sector marked as restricted in the Galactic Coalition's database, a region where no sentient species was supposed to exist. Her secondary hearts beat faster as she processed the implications. Someone was out there, calling for help from a world the galaxy had long ago declared too hostile for civilization. "Commander, I'm detecting a planetary body," reported Ensign Kroll, his tentacles dancing across the sensor array with practiced precision. "Class undesignation, but the atmospheric readings are alarming. Oxygen levels at 21%. Nitrogen at 78%. The combination is highly corrosive to most known biology." He paused, his vocal sac inflating with distress. "There are also significant quantities of dihydrogen monoxide in all 3 states across the surface. This world is a death trap." Zethria's 4 eyes narrowed as she examined the data. The planet rotated slowly on the view screen, a swirling mixture of blue, green, and white that would have been beautiful if it weren't so obviously lethal. The oxygen concentration alone would burn through most species' respiratory systems within minutes. The presence of water in such abundance suggested constant environmental instability, storms and floods that would devastate any settlement. And yet, the distress beacon continued its steady pulse, indicating that someone had not only survived on this nightmare world but possessed technology advanced enough to send an interstellar signal. "Life signs?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. What kind of being could endure such an environment? Kroll's tentacles hesitated over the controls. "That's the strange part, Commander. I'm reading thousands of concentrated life signatures in clusters across the planet's surface. Millions more scattered in smaller groups. The density suggests cities, infrastructure. But the biological readings don't match anything in our database. Their internal temperature averages 37 degrees on the standard scale. They should be cooking themselves from the inside." Zethria felt a chill run through her crystalline structure despite the climate-controlled bridge. An unknown species, thriving in conditions that would kill most of the galaxy's inhabitants, now calling for help. Every instinct screamed at her to mark the coordinates and report back to Valoria for a full military assessment. But the Valerian code was clear: all sentient life deserved protection, all distress calls must be answered. She had sworn an oath when she accepted her commission, had crystallized her commitment into her very molecular structure during the binding ceremony. "Can you pinpoint the beacon's origin?" she asked, her decision made even as her tactical training warned her of the risk. "Yes, Commander. A landmass in the northern hemisphere, eastern quadrant. Population density approximately 8 million in the immediate vicinity." Kroll looked up from his station, bioluminescent patterns of concern rippling across his skin. "Commander, with respect, shouldn't we wait for reinforcements? If this species is dangerous." "If they were dangerous, Ensign, they wouldn't be asking for help," Zethria interrupted, though even she heard the uncertainty in her voice. "Prepare a rescue team. Full environmental suits rated for corrosive atmospheres. I'll lead the mission personally." She turned to her second officer, a Gathrian named Vex whose reptilian features remained impassive as always. "You have the bridge. If we don't report back within 6 cycles, jump to Coalition space and request immediate military intervention." Vex's forked tongue flickered in acknowledgement. "Understood, Commander. May the stars light your path." 2 hours later, Zethria found herself strapped into a landing shuttle alongside 5 of her best crew members, descending through the planet's turbulent atmosphere. The shuttle bucked and shuddered as it cut through dense layers of nitrogen and oxygen, the hull temperature rising steadily despite their advanced shielding. Through the viewport, she watched lightning arc between massive cloud formations, the raw display of electromagnetic power unlike anything she'd witnessed on civilized worlds. This planet was alive with energy, violent and untamed. "I'm reading the beacon's exact location," announced Lieutenant Mora from the pilot's seat, her feathered crest flattened against her skull in concentration. "It's coming from some kind of structure. Massive. Maybe their central government building or a temple." The shuttle broke through the cloud layer, and suddenly the surface was visible below. Zethria's breath caught in her respiratory chamber. The city sprawled across the landscape like a living organism, buildings of glass and steel reaching toward the sky in defiant towers. Ribbons of gray stone crisscrossed between them, filled with thousands of moving vehicles. Lights glittered everywhere despite it being the planet's day cycle, and massive displays flickered with images and symbols she couldn't decipher. This wasn't the primitive settlement of a species barely clinging to survival. This was a thriving metropolis that rivaled anything in Coalition space. "Those structures," breathed Kroll from his station. "Some of them are over 300 meters tall. On a high-gravity world like this, the engineering required, it shouldn't be possible with conventional materials." Zethria was already running calculations in her head. The planet's gravity was 0.98 standard, nearly identical to Valoria Prime. But given the hostile atmosphere and the presence of so much water, the structural stress on buildings would be immense. These beings weren't just surviving, they were thriving, building civilizations that matched or exceeded the galaxy's standards. So why the distress call? The shuttle landed on a designated pad near the beacon source, a sprawling complex of buildings surrounding a central tower. As the engines powered down, Zethria checked her environmental suit one final time, ensuring every seal was secure against the corrosive air outside. Her team did the same, weapons holstered but accessible. They weren't here to fight, but preparedness had kept her alive through 15 years of service. "Remember," she said over the team channel, "we're here to render aid. Keep your translators active, your weapons secured unless I give explicit orders otherwise. We represent the Valerian Empire and the Galactic Coalition. Whatever we encounter here today will determine how this species views the greater galaxy." The shuttle's ramp descended with a hydraulic hiss, and Zethria got her first unfiltered view of the alien world. The air shimmered with heat rising from the stone surface of the landing pad. Strange sounds assaulted her audio receptors, the whoosh of vehicles in the distance, the cry of aerial creatures, and something else, a rhythmic wailing that rose and fell with unsettling urgency. Her suit's sensors immediately began cataloging threats: atmospheric oxygen causing mild oxidation on the shuttle's exposed surfaces, microscopic organisms floating in the air, temperature fluctuations that suggested unstable weather patterns. A group of beings emerged from the central tower, and Zethria's four eyes widened in shock. They were bipedal, that much was familiar. But they wore no environmental protection, nothing between their fragile-looking skin and the lethal atmosphere. They walked upright on two legs, had two arms, and a single head with features clustered at the front, two eyes, a respiratory opening, a communication orifice. Their skin tones varied from pale tan to deep brown, and they were covered partially in colorful fabrics that seemed more decorative than functional. The lead being raised one appendage in what her cultural database suggested might be a peaceful greeting. It opened its mouth, and sounds emerged, complex, modulated, clearly language. Her translator worked frantically to parse the patterns. "Welcome," the device finally rendered in standard. "Thank you for responding to our distress call. I'm Secretary General Chen of the United Nations of Earth. We've been hoping someone would hear us." Earth. So that was what they called their world. Zethria descended the ramp carefully, acutely aware that her team's weapons and armor might seem threatening to these unprotected beings. Up close, she could see that the human, her translator provided the species name, was male, with graying hair and lines around his eyes that suggested significant age. He looked fragile, yet he stood in the toxic air as though it were perfectly natural. "I am Commander Zethria of the Valerian Empire, representing the Galactic Coalition," she replied, her translator converting her crystalline harmonics into sounds these humans could process. "We received your distress beacon and came as quickly as we could. What is the nature of your emergency?" Secretary General Chen's features shifted into what her database identified as a smile, though it seemed tinged with sadness. "Please, follow me inside where you'll be more comfortable. We have much to discuss, and I'm afraid the situation is more complex than a simple distress call might suggest." Zethria exchanged glances with her team, a silent communication of caution, before nodding. They followed the humans into the tower, passing through transparent doors that slid open automatically. The interior was cooler, the air circulated by mechanical systems that hummed softly. More humans moved through the corridors, all of them stopping to stare at the armored aliens in their midst. Some pulled out small devices and pointed them at the visitors, though scans detected no weapon signatures. The humans seemed curious rather than afraid, which struck Zethria as odd. Shouldn't a species advanced enough for interstellar communication understand the risks of alien contact? They were led into a large chamber with a massive table surrounded by chairs clearly designed for human physiology. Displays covered the walls, showing what appeared to be news broadcasts from around the planet. Zethria saw images of humans in various settings, some in cities like this one, others in less developed areas, still others in white protective garments working with advanced technology. It was a civilization of contrasts, primitive and advanced simultaneously. "Please, be seated if your physiology allows," Chen said, taking a chair at the head of the table. Other humans filed in, taking positions around the table. Zethria noticed they were of varying ages and appearances, likely representing different factions of their government. "I apologize for the deception inherent in our distress call. We're not in immediate danger, at least not in the conventional sense." Zethria remained standing, her tactical training screaming warnings. "You sent a false distress signal? Do you understand that violates dozens of interstellar treaties? That such an act could be considered hostile under coalition law?" A female human with dark skin and silver hair leaned forward. "We understand it was unorthodox, Commander. I'm Dr. Amara Okonkwo, Earth's chief scientific advisor. We've known about the galactic community for approximately 8 of our years. We detected your ships, your communications, the energy signatures of your jump drives. We've been studying you." The words sent ice through Zethria's structure. "That's impossible. Our stealth technology is effective against sensors designed to detect your specific energy signatures." "Yes," Dr. Okonkwo interrupted gently. "But we developed our detection methods independently, based on our understanding of quantum mechanics and gravitational distortion. We know about the coalition, the major empires, the trade routes. We've been watching and learning." Kroll's bioluminescent patterns flashed alarm. "Commander, if they have that level of technology, why haven't they made official contact? Why the subterfuge?" Secretary General Chen sighed, a very human gesture of weariness. "Because we've studied your history as well, Commander Zethria. We've intercepted your data streams, translated your languages, learned your cultures. And we've noticed a disturbing pattern. Every time a new species is welcomed into the coalition, they're evaluated, categorized, assigned a role based on their physiology and home world. The strong become soldiers. The intelligent become scientists. The diplomatic become administrators. Everyone finds their place in the galactic hierarchy. That's how civilized society functions," Zethria said, though something in Chen's tone made her uneasy. "Each species contributes according to their strengths. It's brought peace to thousands of worlds." "Peace, yes, but also stagnation," another human interjected, a younger male with sharp features. "I'm Director James Wright, Earth Defense Initiative. We've analyzed 3,000 years of coalition history. Technological advancement has slowed to near zero. Cultural exchange has become homogenized. Species that join either accept their assigned role or face economic and political isolation. It's not a coalition, Commander. It's a caste system enforced by social pressure and economic dependence." Zethria felt her crystals resonating with indignation. "You understand nothing of galactic politics. The coalition prevents war, protects developing species, maintains order across a galaxy where humanity would be classified as what, exactly? Dr. Okonkwo pulled up a display showing physiological comparisons. We're not the strongest, dozens of species exceed our physical capabilities. We're not the most intelligent, several species have demonstrated greater cognitive capacity. We're not the fastest, the longest-lived, or the most psychically gifted. By coalition standards, we're average in every measurable way. Which means we'd be assigned to support roles, manual labor, perhaps low-level administration. Our civilization would be absorbed, our independence surrendered for the privilege of galactic membership. And you prefer isolation? Zethria challenged, though the human's analysis was uncomfortably accurate. She'd read the classification reports, knew how the bureaucracy worked. An average species on a hostile world would indeed be relegated to minor roles. We prefer partnership on equal terms, Chen said firmly. Which brings us to why we sent the distress call. We want to make official contact with the coalition, but not as supplicants begging for membership. We want to be recognized as equals, and we believe we have something to offer that will make that possible. Lieutenant Mora had been silent until now, but her voice crackled over the team channel. Commander, my scans of the city show military installations. Significant ones. I'm detecting weapon signatures that don't match any known technology. Zethria's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm, but Chen raised his hands in a placating gesture. Please, Commander, there's no threat to you or your crew. But Director Wright is correct that we need to be honest about our capabilities. We didn't develop in isolation from the galaxy, we developed in spite of our knowledge of it. Every advance we've made has been with the understanding that we'd eventually need to defend our independence. Defend against what? Zethria demanded. The coalition doesn't conquer. We don't invade or subjugate. Not with soldiers, no, Dr. Okonkwo agreed. But economic pressure, technological gatekeeping, the subtle enforcement of cultural norms, these are weapons too, just slower and harder to see. We've watched species join the coalition with hope and enthusiasm, only to see their unique cultures fade within a few generations, their home worlds becoming indistinguishable from any other member planet. Zethria wanted to argue, but she'd seen the same thing herself during missions to newly integrated worlds. The eager adoption of coalition standards, the abandonment of local traditions, the gradual homogenization that came with galactic membership. She'd always assumed it was natural, the inevitable result of exposure to superior technology and culture. But hearing it framed as cultural erosion made her crystals ache with uncomfortable recognition. So what do you want from us? She asked quietly. Why bring us here, reveal your knowledge, risk everything on this conversation? Secretary General Chen stood, walking to a window that overlooked the sprawling city. Because despite our concerns, we don't want to hide forever. Humanity is ready for the stars, Commander. We're ready to meet our neighbors, to share what we've learned, to be part of something greater than ourselves. But we'll do it as partners, not subordinates. We brought you here to deliver a message to the coalition. Earth requests formal diplomatic relations, with full sovereignty recognized. We're willing to share our technology, our culture, our knowledge, but not our independence. The coalition will never accept those terms, Zethria said, though part of her wondered if that was true. No species has joined with full sovereignty intact. There are standards, protocols, security requirements. Then we'll wait, Chen said simply. We've survived on this death trap of a world for hundreds of thousands of years, Commander. We've built civilizations, destroyed them, and built them again. We've split the atom, mapped our genome, sent machines to other planets in our system. We've done all of this without any help from the galaxy, and will continue to advance whether the coalition accepts us or not. But we'd prefer cooperation to isolation. That's the message we need you to carry back. Zethria looked at her team, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in their expressions. They'd come expecting to rescue a primitive species from some catastrophe, but instead they'd found a civilization that was technologically sophisticated, politically unified, and apparently unwilling to accept the galaxy's standard terms of contact. It was unprecedented, possibly dangerous, and absolutely needed to be reported to coalition leadership immediately. I'll deliver your message, she said finally. but I can't promise the response will be what you hope for. The coalition has existed for over 50,000 years. It doesn't change easily, and it doesn't negotiate from a position of uncertainty. Chen smiled again, that strange human expression that conveyed both warmth and something harder to define. We understand, Commander. But perhaps it's time the coalition experienced a little uncertainty. The galaxy is vast, and humanity is patient. We'll be here when you're ready to talk as equals. As Zethria led her team back to the shuttle, her mind raced with implications. Everything about this mission felt wrong, yet nothing technically violated coalition law except the false distress signal, a minor infraction compared to the revelation that an unknown species had been observing galactic civilization for years. They had intelligence on coalition technology, military capabilities, political structures. They'd achieved interstellar sensor technology independently, suggesting scientific capabilities that might exceed current galactic standards in specific fields. And they lived unprotected on a world that would kill most species within hours. What else were humans capable of at the galaxy? Didn't know? What other surprises lurked behind their fragile-looking exteriors and their startling request for equality? As the shuttle lifted off and Earth fell away below them, Zethria realized that the Galactic Coalition was about to face its first real challenge in millennia, not from a hostile empire or a cosmic catastrophe, but from a species of beings who looked at the stars and saw not masters to serve, but equals to stand beside. She just hoped the coalition was ready for it, because something told her that humanity wouldn't take no for an answer. The emergency session of the Galactic Coalition Council convened within 48 hours of the Celestial Mercy's return to Coalition space. Zethria stood in the center of the grand amphitheater, hundreds of different species arranged in concentric circles around her, their attention fixed on her testimony with varying degrees of disbelief and concern. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, a floating sphere of transparent aluminum suspended in the void of space, with the swirling colors of the Nexus Nebula providing a breathtaking backdrop. Under normal circumstances, Zethria found the view calming. Today, it only emphasized how small and fragile civilization seemed against the vastness of the universe. "Let me understand this correctly, Commander," said High Chancellor Vorn, his massive rocky form shifting with what might have been agitation. The Brenthian leader had governed the coalition for 2 centuries, and his voice carried the weight of unquestioned authority. "This species, these humans, have been observing us for nearly a decade, possess sensor technology we cannot detect, and are demanding entry into the coalition with full sovereignty. And they accomplished all of this while living on a Class M death world with no outside assistance?" Zethria kept her stance rigid, military protocol overriding her own turbulent thoughts. "That is correct, High Chancellor. Furthermore, their technological development appears to have progressed along different theoretical lines than our own. Dr. Okonkwo, their chief scientist, indicated they can detect jump drives through gravitational distortion patterns. Our stealth systems were designed to mask energy signatures, not gravitational effects." A ripple of concerned murmurs spread through the assembly. Counselor Threx, a Gathrian military strategist whose tactical genius was legendary, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "If they can detect our movements, they've effectively compromised every military operation in their sector. How many ships have they observed? What intelligence have they gathered? They claim to have mapped major trade routes, identified coalition military patrol patterns, and intercepted data transmissions," Zethria reported, each word feeling like a betrayal even though she was simply stating facts. "However, they've taken no hostile action. Their stated goal is diplomatic contact on equal terms." "Equal terms," scoffed Counselor Iris, her insectoid mandibles clicking with amusement. "A single planet, isolated and unknown, demands equality with a coalition spanning thousands of worlds? This is either remarkable arrogance or dangerous delusion." But High Chancellor Vorn wasn't laughing. His ancient eyes, like chips of obsidian embedded in stone, studied Zethria with uncomfortable intensity. "Commander, you spent several hours with these humans. What is your professional assessment? Are they a threat to coalition security?" Zethria had known this question was coming and had spent the entire journey back trying to formulate an answer. The truth was complex, nuanced, and potentially damning. High Chancellor, I believe humans represent a paradigm shift. They're not a military threat in the conventional sense. Their weapons technology appears roughly equivalent to our own, perhaps slightly behind in energy weapons but possibly ahead in kinetic systems. But ideologically? She paused, choosing her words carefully. They challenge the fundamental structure of the coalition. They've studied our history and concluded that membership means cultural assimilation and loss of autonomy. And based on my observations, they're not entirely wrong. The chamber erupted. Dozens of species began talking simultaneously, their translators creating a cacophony of disagreement, concern, and outrage. High Chancellor Vorn raised one massive hand, and silence fell like a hammer blow. Explain yourself, Commander. That statement borders on sedition. Zethria's crystals hummed with anxiety, but she'd committed herself to honesty. I've served the Coalition for 15 years, visited over 50 member worlds. The pattern Dr. Okonkwo described is accurate. New species are integrated based on their primary utility. Their unique cultural elements are preserved in databases and museums, but the living culture adapts to Coalition standards within 2 or 3 generations. We call it progress, enlightenment, civilization. The humans call it cultural erosion. Both perspectives have merit. Counselor Threx's reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile. The commander makes an interesting point, though perhaps inadvertently. If these humans can recognize this pattern, they're more perceptive than we've given them credit for. The question becomes, what do they truly want? And more importantly, what are they willing to do to get it? They want partnership, Zethria said. They were very clear about this. They're willing to share technology, knowledge, and culture, but not surrender their sovereignty. They want to explore the galaxy, meet other species, participate in galactic affairs, but as an independent entity, not as a subordinate member state. High Chancellor Vorn was quiet for a long moment, his massive form utterly still. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than dismissive. In 50,000 years of Coalition history, no species has ever requested such terms. Every civilization that's achieved interstellar awareness has sought our protection, our technology, our guidance. Why are these humans different? Before Zethria could answer, the chamber's communication system activated with an urgent priority override. A junior aide, a nervous-looking Pelthian, appeared on the central display. High Chancellor, forgive the interruption, but we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the human home world, Earth. They're broadcasting on all known Coalition frequencies, and the signal is strong enough to reach every major settled system within 20 light-years. The council chamber fell silent. High Chancellor Vorn's expression was unreadable. Put it through. The display shifted, and suddenly Secretary General Chen appeared, life-sized and three-dimensional in the center of the chamber. Behind him, Zethria recognized the same United Nations tower from her visit, but the view had changed. Where before she'd seen only the interior, now the image showed Chen standing on what appeared to be an observation deck, with Earth's blue-green surface visible through massive windows behind him. But that wasn't what made Zethria's crystals freeze with shock. Beyond Earth, in orbit around the planet, hung 12 massive structures that definitely hadn't been there during her visit 72 hours ago. They were ships, clearly artificial, each easily 3 kilometers in length. Their design was unlike anything in the Coalition database, angular where most species preferred curves, bristling with what could only be weapon emplacements, and surrounded by smaller craft that moved in precise formation. It was a fleet that had appeared out of nowhere, and the implications were staggering. Greetings to the Galactic Coalition Council, Chen said, his voice calm and diplomatic. I apologize for the dramatic nature of this communication, but Commander Zethria's departure made it clear that our initial message might not be taken seriously. We wanted to ensure there was no confusion about Earth's capabilities or our commitment to joining the galactic community as equal partners. Counselor Threx was already shouting orders to military aides. Get me reconnaissance data on that system immediately. How did they build a fleet without our detection? How did they? If I may, Chen continued, apparently unable to hear the chaos in the council chamber, I'd like to address some concerns your leadership likely has. First, this fleet has been under construction for the past 6 years, built in orbital facilities on the far side of our moon, a natural satellite that conveniently blocks observation from the galactic plane. Second, these ships incorporate human innovations in materials science, power generation, and propulsion. We don't use your jump drive technology, we developed our own faster-than-light system based on different theoretical principles. Zethria watched High Chancellor Vorn's face, seeing centuries of certainty crumbling behind his ancient eyes. An unknown species had not only achieved interstellar capability independently but had apparently surpassed Coalition technology in key areas. It should have been impossible. Developing faster-than-light travel required specific theoretical breakthroughs that the Coalition had achieved through the combined knowledge of hundreds of species over millennia. Humanity had done it alone, in secret, in less than a decade. Third, Chen said, and now his diplomatic smile had an edge to it, we want to be absolutely clear that this is not a threat. We're not interested in conquest or conflict. These ships are defensive in nature, designed to protect Earth's sovereignty while we navigate the complexities of galactic politics. We're showing you this because we believe honesty is the foundation of any real partnership. We could have hidden our capabilities, played the role of the primitive species grateful for your attention. But that would have been a lie, and lies are a poor foundation for the relationship we hope to build. Dr. Okonkwo stepped into frame beside Chen, carrying a data device. We're transmitting scientific data to accompany this message. Our research on gravitational manipulation, our approach to faster-than-light physics, advances in medical technology that might benefit species across the galaxy. This is a gesture of good faith, a demonstration that humanity has much to offer as a partner, not a subordinate. The display in the council chamber began filling with data streams, complex mathematical formulas and experimental results flooding in faster than the automated systems could process. Zethria saw Iris, whose species were renowned mathematicians, tentacles flying across a personal console, her earlier amusement replaced by intense concentration. This is revolutionary, Iris breathed, her translator barely keeping up with her rapid speech. Their approach to space-time manipulation is completely different from ours. They're not creating wormholes, they're somehow reducing the effective distance between points. The energy requirements would be massive, but the theoretical framework is sound. Stars above, this could cut interstellar travel times by orders of magnitude if we could adapt it to our existing systems. Chen's image smiled as if he could hear her, though Zethria knew the transmission was one way. We hope this demonstrates our sincerity. Earth doesn't want to stand apart from the galactic community, we want to be part of it. But we've learned from history, both our own and yours, that power dynamics determine the nature of relationships. We're showing you our strength not to intimidate, but to establish that any partnership between Earth and the Coalition must be between equals. We propose a summit, Dr. Okonkwo added. Representatives from Earth and the Coalition Council, meeting on neutral ground to discuss terms of association. We're willing to contribute to galactic security, share technology, participate in scientific and cultural exchanges. But Earth will remain sovereign, will maintain control over our own military and domestic policies, and will engage with the Coalition as an independent ally rather than a member state. Secretary General Chen stepped forward, his expression earnest. We understand this is unprecedented. We understand it challenges conventions established over thousands of years. But the galaxy is changing, whether the Coalition acknowledges it or not. Humanity is just the first. There will be others, species developing in the shadows, learning from your example, deciding whether to join you or chart their own course. The decision you make about Earth will echo across the galaxy for generations. Choose partnership over domination, cooperation over control, and we'll build something together that surpasses anything the Coalition has achieved alone. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Zethria felt the weight of hundreds of eyes turning toward her, as if she somehow held answers to questions no one had thought to ask before. High Chancellor Vorn sat motionless, processing information that challenged every assumption about the Coalition's place in the galaxy. It was Councillor Threx who spoke first, his military mind cutting through the shock. This changes everything. If humans can develop advanced technology independently, other isolated species might be doing the same. We've assumed our technological superiority kept us safe, that any emerging species would need our guidance. But if Earth could build a fleet in secret, who else might be watching us right now? The real question, said Counselor Morven, a philosophical Centauri who rarely spoke but commanded respect when she did, is whether the humans are right. Have we created a coalition or a hierarchy? Do we truly integrate new species, or do we absorb them? When was the last time a new member world contributed something that changed coalition policy or technology? The silence that followed was damning. Zethria realized she couldn't think of a single instance in her lifetime where a newly integrated species had significantly influenced the coalition's direction. They were welcomed, classified, assigned their role, and gradually molded to fit existing structures. It was efficient, stable, and exactly what the humans refused to accept. High Chancellor Vorn finally stirred, his ancient voice heavy with contemplation. Commander Zethria, you've had direct contact with human leadership. If we refuse their terms, if we demand they integrate according to standard protocols, what do you believe they'll do? Zethria thought of Chen's steady gaze, Dr. Okonkwo's quiet confidence, Director Wright's tactical awareness. She thought of the city sprawling across Earth's surface, of millions of humans living unprotected in conditions that would kill most of the galaxy's inhabitants. She thought of a species that had split atoms and mapped genomes and built interstellar warships, all while the coalition assumed they were too primitive to notice. They'll refuse, she said with absolute certainty. They'll continue developing independently, expanding into their local space, making contact with other species on their own terms. And eventually, they'll be powerful enough that the coalition will have no choice but to negotiate from a weaker position. The humans are offering partnership now, while they're still relatively contained. Refusing them doesn't eliminate the problem, it just delays it while making them less inclined to cooperate in the future. Or, Threx interjected, we could quarantine their system. Establish a military perimeter, prevent them from expanding until they agree to proper integration. The temperature in Zethria's structure dropped. That would be an act of war, Counselor. Against a species that's done nothing hostile except refuse to surrender their independence. Is that really the legacy we want for the coalition? Bullying isolated species into submission? It's maintaining galactic order, Threx shot back. Every species must contribute to the greater good. We can't allow humanity to pick and choose which responsibilities they'll accept. But who decided those responsibilities? Zethria found herself arguing, her voice stronger than she'd intended. The coalition was founded on principles of mutual protection and cooperation. When did it become about conformity and control? The humans aren't rejecting cooperation, they're rejecting subordination. There's a difference. High Chancellor Vorn raised his hand again, forestalling further debate. These are questions that cannot be answered in a single session. We will adjourn for 3 cycles to review the data Earth has provided and to consult with our respective governments. Commander Zethria, you will remain available for additional testimony. Counselor Threx, prepare military assessments but take no action without full council approval. Counselor Iris, form a scientific team to evaluate the human technology. As the counselors filed out, Zethria remained in the center of the chamber, watching the Nexus Nebula swirl beyond the transparent walls. She felt a presence approach and turned to find High Chancellor Vorn standing beside her, his massive form somehow less imposing up close. You've changed, Commander, he said quietly. A few days ago, you were a loyal officer who followed protocol without question. Now you argue against the Council's traditional position. What did these humans do to you? Zethria considered her words carefully. They asked me a question I'd never thought to ask myself, who benefits from the way things are? And when I looked honestly at the answer, I realized it wasn't the newly integrated species. We've built something magnificent, High Chancellor, but we've also built something rigid. The humans are forcing us to examine whether our strength comes from our unity or from our diversity. And if it's unity we value above all else, then perhaps we've become what we once fought against, an empire that demands conformity rather than a coalition that celebrates difference. Vorn was silent for a long moment. You're young, Commander, and you've spent more time with humans than any other coalition representative. Perhaps that makes you compromised, or perhaps it makes you the only one who truly understands what we're facing. He turned to leave, then paused. There will be another mission to Earth, a formal diplomatic delegation. I want you to lead it. You've established rapport with their leadership, and we'll need that in the negotiations ahead. What are we negotiating? Zethria asked. Are we actually considering their proposal? The High Chancellor's laugh was like grinding stone. The humans are correct about one thing: power determines the nature of relationships. They've demonstrated they have power, both technological and military. That makes them impossible to ignore and dangerous to antagonize. Whether we like it or not, humanity has forced the coalition to evolve. The question is whether we'll do so willingly, through negotiated partnership, or reluctantly, after they've demonstrated we have no other choice. He lumbered away, leaving Zethria alone with the stars. Through the transparent floor, she could see coalition ships moving in precise formation, the orderly dance of a civilization that had known its place in the universe for millennia. But somewhere out there, beyond the mapped trade routes and patrolled sectors, Earth hung in space like a blue-green promise or threat, a world that had looked at the galaxy's power structures and simply said no. 3 weeks later, Zethria returned to Earth aboard a diplomatic vessel accompanied by representatives from a dozen major coalition species. They landed at the same United Nations complex, but this time they were met with full ceremonial honors. Human music played, complex, emotional compositions unlike anything in the coalition's cultural databases. Children waved colored fabrics in what appeared to be a gesture of welcome. And standing at the center of it all, Secretary General Chen smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd played a dangerous game and won. The negotiations took months. The coalition demanded security guarantees, technology sharing agreements, and participation in mutual defense pacts. Earth countered with requests for territorial recognition, protection of their cultural autonomy, and the right to conduct independent diplomacy with other species. It was exhausting, frustrating, and utterly unprecedented. But slowly, grudgingly, an agreement took shape. Earth would become the first associated partner of the Galactic Coalition, not a member state, but an allied sovereign entity with full diplomatic recognition. They would contribute to galactic security, share scientific advances, and participate in cultural exchanges, but would maintain complete control over their own governance and military. In return, the coalition would provide access to mapped space, diplomatic support, and mutual defense guarantees. It wasn't what the coalition had wanted, but as Zethria watched the treaty signing ceremony, she realized it might be exactly what the galaxy needed. Around her, she saw representatives from smaller coalition member worlds watching with barely concealed hope. If Earth could negotiate from a position of strength, perhaps they could renegotiate their own terms. The rigid hierarchy that had governed galactic politics for millennia was beginning to crack. After the ceremony, Zethria found Chen standing alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. His fleet still hung in orbit, a reminder that Earth's compliance was voluntary, not compelled. "Thank you, Commander," he said without turning. "Your testimony to the Council made a difference. You could have portrayed us as a threat, recommended military action. Instead, you advocated for understanding." Zethria joined him at the window, her crystalline form reflecting the starlight. "I told the truth. That's all." "Truth is often a choice," Chen replied. "You chose to see us as potential partners rather than potential threats. That choice may have saved lives on both sides." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Earth rotate below. Finally, Zethria spoke the thought that had haunted her since their first meeting. "You were never really in danger, were you? The distress call, the apparent vulnerability, it was all calculated to draw us in, to force contact on your terms." Chen's smile was enigmatic. "We needed someone to take our message to the Council, someone who had seen Earth, spoken with us, and could testify that we weren't monsters. A formal diplomatic overture would have been ignored or stalled in bureaucracy for years. but a Valerian commander responding to a distress call, witnessing our capabilities firsthand, then advocating for negotiation? That had weight. He turned to face her directly. We're not above manipulation, Commander. We learned from watching the coalition that power alone isn't enough. You need leverage, timing, and narrative. We provided all three. Zethria should have felt used, but instead she felt a strange admiration. You're dangerous, she said softly. Not because of your weapons or your ships, but because you understand how civilizations work. You looked at a galactic order that had existed for 50,000 years and found its pressure points. We had good teachers, Chen said. The Coalition's history is full of lessons about power, politics, and the importance of perception. We just applied those lessons in ways you didn't expect. He paused, his expression growing more serious. But the danger isn't humanity, Commander. The danger is stagnation. Your coalition stopped growing, stopped adapting. You perfected a system and then assumed perfection meant you were finished. We're not your enemies, we're the disruption you needed to start evolving again. As Zethria prepared to depart Earth for the final time, she realized the humans had been right all along. They weren't the ones who needed saving. The Galactic Coalition, locked in its ancient certainties and comfortable hierarchies, had been the one in danger of irrelevance, of stagnation, of missing the universe's fundamental truth that everything must change or die. Humanity hadn't threatened the galaxy with weapons or conquest. They'd threatened it with a simple, revolutionary idea, that independence and cooperation weren't mutually exclusive, that strength could come from diversity rather than uniformity. The real threat wasn't what humanity would do to the galaxy. It was what humanity would inspire others to become. And as Zethria's ship lifted away from Earth, carrying news of the unprecedented treaty to every corner of Coalition space, she knew the galaxy would never be the same. The age of unquestioned hierarchy was ending. The age of negotiated partnership was beginning. And humanity, fragile and fierce in equal measure, had fired the first shot in a revolution that would reshape the stars.